Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight we are going to be talking about the evolution of the human being, the expanding of our consciousness, the opening up of our awareness, and the time in which we say our mind is no longer restricted to, as we say, the olden days, those 8 to 5 work days, those things where we say we climb a ladder, we have a legacy, and then an obituary. A life that is very closed, sheltered, limited, and perhaps we just believe we are given a book and we follow the templates. Now in the year 2024, we go, wow, where are we going? How has the world expanded? And if I looked back on even last year, can I even remember what happened in the beginning of last year? Can I even remember how things used to be? Can I even put into place today those old stories, the old ways, and the old things that have been going on in the world? We truly are about keeping our face forward, opening up our eyes and saying, what magic is coming to me today? How can I engage in the world with a different perception? Perhaps putting away those rose-colored glasses and say, I am full on, ready, bring it on. What does the world have for me today? And isn't that excitement of how we should be living our lives or how we would love to be? How do we get there? Well, today my guest is Cortney McDermott. Her book is Give Yourself Permission. Be confident, be happy, be you. And that's exactly what we'll be talking about today. Cortney, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Dr. Jeanette. I'm happy to be here.
It's a great time, don't you think, Cortney, in the year 2024, we say, wow, could we even look back and reflect and put the old things into practice? I don't even think we can remember them. Do you think?
Well, yeah, I think we're moving at such a pace, right? So it's definitely the question around stopping and noticing and becoming more aware. I think it's really prevalent, but also hard to answer a lot of times in just how fast-paced everything is.
I think that the idea is that I'm much older than you, of course, by many decades, and the way we lived our lives and grew up in the 1900s, it sounds so silly to say, but it's true, but, in the 50s and the 60s, life was very concise. You knew what was coming down the path. You knew where you were going. You knew how things would unfold. Whereas today, we look at different generations and we say they have such a different outlook on life. Don't you think?
Yeah, well, I also believe that lots of times we might think or even want to think that we know where things are going, but the reality of it is we never really do, right? So even as our world gets more and more wild, there's always this desire, I think, that we have to sort of see, again, be able to see ahead. And even though we might have a strong intuition or we can rely on some of our psychic abilities, but it's like the point is the wonder of just like not knowing as well. And I think, yes, right. It's definitely exacerbated in a society where you have just way more stimuli. And at the same time, I think it's actually, I think the trick is I have no idea what's going to happen. And isn't that exciting, to your points that you made at the beginning in the intro? Yeah.
Yeah, I look at the idea, I think I shared it maybe about 10, 13 years ago. I said, just get a bunch of seeds, dump them into a bowl, mix them all together, and just go about and cast those seeds out. Wait for a few months, go back and see what has grown. And you look at it and you say, wow, I didn't know that was in there. Oh, my goodness, is that what grew? And you were just astounded by the magic of what was able to survive in the surroundings and be able to grow. Yet, I think sometimes people say, but I planted these tomatoes. I'm going to put a stake in the ground. Tomatoes are going to grow. I'm going to stick a little picture on there because this is what they should look like. And if they don't, well, we consider it a weed and then we throw it out. Mm-hmm. You know, I think a lot of people decide which side of the paradigm are we going to be on, because that's distinctly two different ends, perhaps?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're bringing up an incredibly important piece of the puzzle, which is this incessant need that we have as humans to control our experience. And that sense of control gives us a false semblance of security in a world in which we don't know what's going to happen. And actually, lots of times we might be influencing that, and we definitely are influencing that through our assumptions, through our attention. And we see that even demonstrated very clearly in science, like the ways that we are moving the wave into the particle, I guess I'll say. And so the planting of tomatoes, when you decide it's only tomatoes and nothing else can grow here, you do miss out on a lot of magic. So, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I think also, too, we see a lot of the, I would call New Age, because that's how a lot have been classified as concepts of thinking. And they're saying, well, let's do gratitude. Let's do a gratitude book. And, you know, let's do our dream book. We do our dream book and we write it down how we want it to appear. We do gratitude for things that we say we have. Yet it's all material. You know, gratitude. I'm grateful for having a job. I'm grateful for having a house over my head. Grateful for the water that flows through the pipes. I'm grateful for, you know, the people around me. But they don't say they're grateful for this illness. They're not grateful for the struggle. They're not grateful for an empty pocket with a hole in it. Do you know what I'm saying? So, in essence, they're always looking at that which will suffice, secure, and keep them on this positive, so to speak, roll. And they say, oh, but I'm just going to keep following the light. I'm going to keep going that way. But then they're in denial of the human experience. That's hugely different, because we can always say everyone can be healthy, yet there are people that need and are in the experience of illness, of disease, of death, of dying, of whatever that might be. But all of this makes the whole. We think of the yin and the yang. It wasn't meant to be gray. It was meant to be black and white, and to go around and evolve. So I think that's very important to bring up, because in your book, you know, when you talk about give yourself permission, I mean, people will say, is it that instantaneous? Is it that easy? And then when things come along that are bumps in the road or things that are different, you go, well, holy crap, then I guess I'm offline. I'm not doing it right. There must be another answer. You know, it's constant mind chatter that keeps continually going on, right?
Yeah, I talk a lot about this in my book, because I talk about learning to think, right? We're not really taught how to think. We actually, the vast majority of us don't really know that much even about thoughts, where they come from. In fact, neuroscience itself doesn't know where a thought comes from, right? So it's an electrical impulse, and I can either attach to it and create a meaning that then creates what we call an emotion, which is actually a physical sensation in my body, and I can wreak havoc, you know? But I think going back to the point you made right before that, this is really important, is the judging of the experience, right? We don't sit and watch an ocean and say, that's a good wave, that's a bad wave, that's a mediocre wave. We don't do that. We watch the ocean in all its majesty. We let the waves do and be what they are and what they do, and we kind of get on with it, right? We actually groove with it, right? And you're totally on point when you say that most of us don't do that with our human experience, in the sense that this is bad, right, and this is good. But as Shakespeare put it, you know, nothing neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. So sort of where are you directing the thought? But more importantly, can you actually sit with this thing that you're calling bad? And we can talk more about that if you want, what I mean specifically by that. But can you stay with it long enough to see the wonder in it, to see the possibility in it, to see the opportunity in it, And if you can do that, things really do shift in pretty dramatic and seemingly miraculous ways.
I think also, too, we were never, quote, taught any way of thinking differently. Even in history, everybody was supposed to look like the clique. Everybody wanted to be like someone else. In the 80s and the 90s, it was, when television came around, everybody wanted to be like the people on TV. They wanted to be important. Now we have social media, and everybody wants likes and comments to be alike, to be liked, and to be similar. You see filters. Everybody wants that perfection. But in essence, is it the essence of an outward projection, or is it living from an inside source, which is two different things? Because once you do cross that bridge where you see that you're something more than that outside projection, you can't go back. I mean, so there's something clicks in your head and you just can't see it. I know for myself, my husband would say something, and I would say, and something in my head would say, I don't even know what you're saying. I don't understand what you're saying, even if it's something common. And it just doesn't resonate with me. I just don't. And he would say, but you need to get back in the real world. This is where the world is, And I'm like, I'm quite fine where I am. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important to say. Are you willing to let that bridge dissolve? Mm-hmm. Or are you holding on to it for dear life?
Yeah, I love it. It's when the subjective reality becomes more real than this thing that everyone, the objectified or the objective, right? And I think lots of times that's where people, I think of it oftentimes, Einstein's discovery of the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. Now, I used to believe that what he was talking about was the field was the external field was informing the nature of the particle. But then what I started to realize as I got older is actually the internal field can also affect and modify and change and transmute the external in quote unquote environment, right? So it's your inner environment becoming the sovereign. And for me, precisely to your point, how you lived it, once you know that, once you live that, once you are that, you can't go back.
It's truly that you just can't. I've shared on this show probably for over a decade now, and I said, people would say to me, who are you? And they'll look at you, who are you? And I'm going, I have this little Rolodex in my head that spins around, and it's going to click on the one that you can understand that I will then share with you. Because otherwise, all those other 99 million things that I truly am or that I feel I am, which is something just as a spirit, essence, you're not ready for. And we think that that's very important because how many times do you go into a room where there's a party and they say, who are you? And you're going, I mean, when you literally stop and go, that's when you know the bridge has been gone. There's no bridge there anymore. Mm-hmm. What you're trying to do is construct something to be able to have an engagement sometimes with some people. Mm-hmm. However, we were also meant to be teachers. So in essence, in that time and frame, you can be a teacher. You could say to them, oh, this is what I do for work, but this is who I have a sense I am. That's a little bit of a bridging. So we're kind of teaching people how to be able to incrementally get along this path. And all of a sudden, it just dissolves. It's sort of like coming out of the fog, perhaps?
Yes, I believe, well, first the abyss between I am and I do. And most of us were raised in a I do culture. Now, especially in the West, we're raised in what do you do? People very rarely actually ask, who are you? That's a much more profound question for someone to ask you, and that will leave space to pause and reflect because the vast majority of us are going around with these, I call them personas, right? Because the person the word person is derived from the Greek, the ancient Greek theater. It meant mask. Okay, so a persona was the mask they wore in theater. So if we look at it through that lens, it's a little bit like, hey, yeah, I go around and I show you this title or that title or this accolade or what have you, right? And all those things are entry points to the observation you made earlier, in that, okay, this person's maybe going to be able to hear what I say if it comes through this character, okay? Because the person is the character. But when you know, and when you really know, and you allow the character to be in service to something much greater. You know, you're a medical intuitive. I consider myself an intuitive in the sense that, I mean, we're all intuitive, but it's who knows it more or less and who's aware of it. When you are allowing that God essence, that spirit essence, however you want to call it, doesn't really matter. I mean, I could even go deeply into the science of this if we wanted. So this isn't just through a spiritual lens. But when you're aware that force source energy is the truth of what you are, and you allow it to sort of take over the character, and you know full well that the character is just this lovely role that you get to play in a boardroom, on a call, on an interview, whatever it is, right? But you put that character, you decide to put that character in service to the divine, game's over.
Yeah. You know, I can distinctly remember, I think it was a while back, and I was really not feeling well, and I was thinking, oh, man, I just don't want to go to the doctor. I am one. I'm not going to do it. And I kind of set it to the side and was resisting it and everything. Finally, I said, okay, I'm going to go. And then when I went, I had an experience, and it was all kinds of shades of this, that, or the other. And then I reflected back on it about 6 or 8 weeks afterwards, because I needed to have that experience. That was important. The resistance was truly just as important. And when I reflected on it, I said, oh, that's what it was. I was supposed to teach the doctor something, show him something differently, so there's a possibility he could have a different outcome. And I went, oh, okay, no big deal. And then I didn't attach the word suffering or pain or agony or a horrible experience. I just said I had an experience. I was in service. Now I reflect on it, and I went, oh, good. Job done, move on. That's the intelligence of the expanded awareness of which we will be operating from as we start to evolve through, versus saying, oh my gosh, I was sick, it was awful, let me tell you this, blah, 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 you know what I mean? And kind of hold on to that as their identity. So the experiences we have and how we receive them, we do need to feel them and experience them and know them, going back to the yin and the yang again. But once we do that, when we can step back out of it when it's completed, that's the glory and the miraculous moment of life. Don't you think?
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, the experience is just that, right? It's an experience. It's a happening. And I think when we allow ourselves to watch it, like, just be curious about it, you know, to the point that you may, well, I'm going into this thing, and now all of a sudden I can feel this resistance, I can feel this, you know, whatever it is. And instead, if we back up a second and we just say, wonder what this is about, you know, and that could be in any moment, that open curiosity. I mean, that's the childlike, that's, you know, become again as children and inherit the kingdom. It's like, instead of closing up here, let me see if I can just relax. It's really very simple, but that doesn't always make it easy.
You also share in your book, Cortney, it says, plan less and feel more. So that's exactly what I had done at that moment. I think sometimes we look at the, you know, January of a new year, we say, let's get our bucket list down for the year, let's get our plan, how things are going to unfold. What if we just put a blank sheet of paper every day on the table and said, world, what can you show me? What kind of experience can I have today? Versus the other way, because the other way you're still, it's almost like you're carrying, I have a vision of you're carrying these, this tool belt, and it's got all these long strands like an octopus of all the things that you're dragging around with you every day to see how they play out, you know? And if you can see that, then you say, ooh, maybe that isn't what I want. Can you show me a different way? That's where a lot of people right now are starting to engage with others and say, there are other ways. Mm-hmm. And there's not one way. There is no guru. There is no template for doing it. It's just about seeing it for yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole plan last thing was actually quite a phenomenon for me when I found it, in the sense that I was very corporate before I went rogue, basically, mm-hmm. and I had all of these. I was trained, and not just even before corporate. I mean, even in my postgrad work or those kinds of things, I was like, oh, I'm trained in this. You've got to get everything down. It's got to be in Excel, or PowerPoint or whatever, and you have to figure all these things out. And I remember the very first year, it was 2017, actually, when I published my first book, when I started to go rogue in the sense of planning, and I just put down these things really softly. Like I actually cut out a piece of cardboard, a box, and I put 12 squares, and I put these things that just felt really good to me in each square, and they were pretty audacious, and I had no idea how to accomplish any of that, and I just relaxed around all of it. It was kind of like this fun little thing that I just did for no real, mm-hmm. Reason. And I remember, wow, in that moment, I remember starting to, because all that year, every single one of those things came to fruition, including publishing my first book, giving a TEDx talk, all these kinds of things. And I thought, wow, okay, well, this relaxed focus thing really works. But to your point, now more and more, especially over the last couple of years, I've been deeply experimenting with no plan at all. And right. Just as you said, I wake up and there's things going on. I've got stuff in my calendar. I've got interviews, talks, whatever it is. We've got a lot of different things moving around the book right now, all those kinds of things. So I know, I'm going to get prompted in different ways or different conversations that are in the calendars, whatever. But even there, I have no idea what's going to happen. I might get in this conversation with you, and who knows, lightning strikes, and we're off. Like, right. I have no idea. But the openness to that in my non-attachment, it's Patanjali, I believe, who wrote Open to Everything, Attached to Nothing. Like, can you go through your day and actually say, oh, well, what's going to happen today? I mean, when you wake up in the morning, can you just have that childlike excitement of, I have no idea what's in front of me. And yet there's some things sprinkled in there that I think I know, but I don't really know, right? And that's actually, I think, what we came for, which is really quite curious if you think about it, because we wanted to have the veil, right? We wanted to not have it all so obvious. It's kind of like I used to tell my daughter this story when she was growing up of a little girl who fell asleep in this, she was awake in the field, and she knew that every flower was this specific kind of experience, and she could pick it and have it. And then she fell asleep, and when she woke up, she forgot that she had this power. She forgot what the flowers represented. And so she got to be surprised. And some of the surprises were pleasant, and some of those surprises were not so pleasant. And the idea in it, went on and on in the story, but the point is, like, we are actually choosing in this dimension, as far as I can tell, to kind of be asleep. And when you do wake up to some of the creative principles, and we could go on and on about creation, that's a whole other story, but like when you wake up to some of them, you start to, the play becomes a little more fun, and also the forgetting aspect of it becomes kind of fun, mm-hmm. and you just start to enjoy things a lot more. Like, even when I talk in the subtitle about be happy, when I say that in the book, I'm not talking about slap a smile on your face and, stand in front of the mirror and laugh. All those things might be great, but the point is like the deep-rooted happiness is really more of a peace. Like, I'm at peace with this. What's happening right now? Oh, that's happening. Oh, that's interesting. It's not, like I said, always super easy, but it is very simple.
So many times I've shared the concept that if we could just get rid of the human language, we would be so much better off, mm-hmm. because every time we use a word, it conjures up a memory. It conjures up a story. It conjures up the way it's supposed to be, or a definition, or, hey, let's, Google it and see what it really is about, So I think sometimes if we don't have the words, we will say, what is that which we are truly looking for or seeking? So if people go out and they have a lot of relationships, so they go out and they're adorning themselves, with all of this whatever, or altering their physical body for whatever reason or whatever, perhaps maybe they're just looking for love, safety, security, to be heard, and to ease into the human story in which they are in. If we looked at just those few things, we would say that's the simple work of the world. If that's all it is, all of this other stuff is just a dance on how they think they're getting there. But sometimes you have to shut off the music. Because when you shut off the music and you turn off the TV, close down all the social media of the way it's supposed to appear, then you can feel how it's supposed to be projected. And you can start projecting it instead of looking at the outcome, and you can start from the inside. That's truly what it's all about, right?
Yeah, I firmly agree with that. And at the same time, so one of the things that it brings up for me is the sentiment from Pascal, and I'm paraphrasing, but when he said all of our problems stem from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And from my personal experience, it's been when I've really sort of filled myself up. In my first book, I talk a bit about filling up so we don't have to feel, right? Fill so you don't have to feel. And we do this in various different ways. Some of them are more socially acceptable than others, so it could be work. That's usually very socially acceptable. It could be study. It could be, there's many different things that maybe people would say, oh, yeah, it's okay, because that's what you're supposed to do. But then there's less socially acceptable ways, drinking, maybe excessive eating, etc. But the whole point is I'm trying to avoid this experience, right? Whatever it is. And I'm sort of numbing out. And I think, to bring up Pascal again, I think our problems do often stem from the reluctance that we have of getting still and hearing the truth in ourselves, because it can be really uncomfortable, especially the longer we haven't been listening to it, the more uncomfortable it can become, even though that truth is actually also very subtle. And again, there's many different angles we could take on that, but I do believe that within peace is crucial. And then, of course, bringing that without, especially to what you were saying earlier, for a lot of people, I'm sure, who are listening to your work and to you, they're coming at it probably from a teacher perspective and a learning perspective. So it's like, oh, well, then how do we go and then once we have that stability, that peace in ourselves, how do we go and sort of, I would say, be the lighthouse, because this is also another quote is popping into my head from Anne Lamott's work, Bird by Bird, where she says, lighthouses don't go all over the island looking for people to save. Lighthouses just stand there shining. And it's like, if you're in your peace, you will stand there shining. And what you're needing to share will be said without the words, to your point earlier. Words are very great. I mean, I use words in a lot of my work is around the words, but it's really what's underneath the words. It's the frequency, it's the vibration of that. And you will know immediately whether you're in resonance with that or not if you listen to yourself. And again, the words are really conveying deeper truths, if they are doing that, which most of the time they're not.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, too, if we just look at the word love, there's so many different ways that people say, well, this is what it is for me, this is what it is for me. And truly what they're really looking for is satisfying some need that they haven't yet identified, and they're using it to suffice and put it in there because they're getting it from some other source, place, or being, If we look at the word self-love, people have been tossing around for the past decade or so. It's self-love. Well, is it really self-love? Again, that's a separation. That's an identifier. But if you look at unconditional love, even that has a smidgen of still a condition put upon it because you're using the word. And if you can just look at the source energy, it has no other words, conditional, unconditional, all of these other quantifiers, so to speak. It just exists. Just as you said, just with the light, it just exists. It just is. So many times when people would ask, who am I would say, I don't know. I'm just a ball of glitter. I'm an energy source inside of this human wetsuit. That's who I am. And I don't have another answer. That is what that is. I mean, my web person has been on me for probably much of 20 years. Every year she goes the same thing. You need to fix your about page on your website. Who are you? And it's like, I don't have an answer. I am. There's nothing else, And I struggle with that because it doesn't. It has zero, influence within who I project or what I feel or how I am. It's just about the story out there. So I think that is where we're expanding to become these enlightened awareness spiritual beings that are just, as I said, ball of glitter inside of a human wetsuit. Maybe.
I love the ball of glitter thing. I'm going to have to quote you on that. Here's my take on it. And again, it goes back to that whole persona piece, but it's one of the terms I don't know if I made it up. I had never heard it before, but I've been playing with the idea of multiple personality order in the sense that I agree with you that we don't need the words, but if we're all trapped in the multiplex of the mind, the right words can help us subtly and slowly and maybe even sometimes rocket ship us out of that. I don't know if I can say certain words on your podcast, but I want to say mental masturbation. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but that thing that happens where you're just chewing up an idea in your mind over and over and over, and you're trying to get at it through the words, you're trying to get at it, you're trying, and it's this non-doing, it's the non-forcing, and it's sort of just allowing yourself to your point, exactly, open up to new potentials. And then when you do that, yes, there's going to be certain potentials that are unique to you and that allow other people to connect with the light that's shining through your form. Because exactly to your point, there's a light shining through your form. The formless is seeking expression through your form. So the way I like to think about it is, yes, you are the formless. That is the ultimate truth of what you are. And yet you are momentarily embodying this form. So what sort of personalities are going to give that formless nature of what you are, that sort of where you feel, and you will feel it, because you'll feel like, this thing is good, this thing is yummy. Like, there's many different things that I've done in my career that I still intend to do. And I wrote a post about this the other day. They're like, okay, singer-songwriter, now I want to do some stand-up comedy. Like, there's all these sorts of things. But I think the most important thing is, okay, let yourself play, not get too attached to either one, either the form or the formless. Just have some fun. I actually dedicate a whole chapter to that, to fun and play in the book, because I think it's so important.
I think also, too, that's the idea, is that it gives you a venue to be able to engage, to be able to be seen, be heard. It also gives you a venue to be able to share with others, being in a life of service, so to speak. Sometimes we say, I hear it from so many times, people in the spiritual community, well, you need to find the light. You need to let the light in through your crown chakra. And I'm going, honey, the light has been inside all the time. It doesn't come from outside. It comes from the inside shining out. And I think people have been so confused because they were so seeking still that outside, being able to pump you up and get you going, so to speak. And a lot of times people will say, oh, well, you don't want to be in the darkness. And I would say, honey, the darkness is nothing. That's where you find the golden glitter, which is a shimmer. So I think the fear, again, of the words, darkness, pain, or suffering or getting it from someplace else or allowing things to come in or out or whatever, all of that is just words again. Because when you come to it and you do step off that edge, it's almost as if, I would say, I've always said that I really see human existence as this black hole. You're spinning around and round and round. And when you get down to that really, tip of the black hole, that's when you say your mind is just really spinning of all of this stuff. And when you pop out, you're then the ball of glitter because you left a human form and all of its context back in the black hole. So it doesn't resonate with you anymore, you know? So like someone will say to me, my gosh, we're going to go to this place, make sure you dress up. And it's like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't even resonate. Or like, well, what are we going to eat for dinner? I'm like, I don't know. I can't tell you. It's been several decades now when I would go to eat. It's like, do I have a want for something? I don't. Or I'll put something down and I'll say, oh, well, I used to have that when I was younger. Let's make that today. I'll go and make it, and it will smell funny, or it will taste wrong, or I'm not interested in it because I'm not connected to the memory of the past to reproduce in the present. So I think sometimes our ideas is, can we release when we get to this point and see that we can pop out the other side of the black hole? Because when we do, people, places, things, that which we knew, that which we held so tightly to, our identity, our form of how we are seen in the world, it does go poof. And that people call that the dark night of the soul. They call it hitting the bottom. They call it transitioning in the world. They call it sitting down in silence like the Buddha. Are you willing to do that?
Yeah, I believe what you're talking about is sort of the in the world but not of the world phenomenon that we can experience when we transcend certain states of consciousness and we expand into others. And I personally have had multiple experiences like that, and I actually write about it, just a couple of them in the book. And this is without plant medicine or anything like that. It was just my consciousness opening up to the truth of what we are. And one of the experiences that I just was written through me, actually, that I share in this second book is it lasted for 2 days. And there was this, again, complete desirelessness. I had my experience was so accentuated in every way. It was just, I knew everything. I heard thought, no thought. I really couldn't even be around people because all of their seeking for approval, all those kinds of things, I felt them so clearly that it was, it wasn't that I couldn't be, that it was a suffering. It was just that my frequency was so different that it was a little bit like I just had to absent myself and be in the darkness. And I remember close to the end of the second day, because I had never thought anything like that could be possible. Maybe you could spend an hour or something, or you had this spontaneous awakening, and then but it was toward the end of the second day, what was coming through was, if you stay like this, you will never be relatable to anyone ever again. And I almost had to decide, but from this place of total neutrality, I was at complete peace. It was absolute bliss. And it was like, well, do I care about that? But there was this other awareness within me that was, you have to come back and use the words and use the writing and use whatever, although it wasn't like that, because it's so much more direct than that. It was this knowing that I did have to come back, but you kind of almost don't want to as well in a way. But it's again, it's so to talk about one or not one is almost like I'm bringing it back into this human experience, because it's not that, it really is in the world but not of the world. It's like you actually in that moment too, you can so enjoy this physical thing because you just marvel. I remember taking a shower in this experience, and I pulled the towel up to my face after, and I just felt the warmth that was generated between my hands, the towel, and my face. And I actually sighed out in my mind this sigh of, this is why you love to be human. Now, maybe to most people hearing this, they think, well, that's wild, that's out there, that's, something, maybe a hallucinatory state. But there was nothing more real than that knowing. And there will, and I've had quite a few experiences like that, and even tried to deconstruct them a bit in the book to explain to people how they've come about without hallucinogenics or things of that nature, which, again, there's a whole bunch of studies on that, too, that's very interesting and compelling, but this was something else.
I think it definitely is about being able to say the world is evolving, we are expanding, our awareness is opening, and to be ready for it. That's truly what we talked about today, I think, Cortney, is about our experiences, our stories, little glimpses into our world, little glimpses back in reflection, and definitely saying we're ready to let go of some of this and be careful because it might just spin by you and you want to just step to the side and let it go when it is there. Because sometimes we don't want to hold on to so much that we are in fear or we're afraid to go forward. Or perhaps maybe we're saying, I'm stuck here and I'm really quite comfortable. Or kind of wall ourselves off. What you and I are saying is that it's not scary over here. It's not fearful over here. It's not crazy over here. It's not something that it's only for the strong-willed and, the wealthy or the whatever. Do you know what I mean? It is open to everyone, and it can be a glimpse in time. Isn't that what we're offering them?
Yeah, I think it's the example of that. And I think once you can see the example of it, you can know that it is available to you. Yeah.
I think sometimes people will say, but, and they get stuck in the but. And I'll say, your butt is getting bigger, honey. Just let the butt go. Do you know what I mean? I would always say, I think it was many decades ago, somebody would say something to me, and I said, I just have my face to the sun, and I'm always going forward, and everything is behind me. But see, it's still stuck to me because my butt is so big, and we would laugh about it because that's where they had to conceptually, I don't understand what that means. You know what I mean? So I almost look at it, if you're looking that you're the light within the human form, the wetsuit, it's almost as if your light starts to perceive out forward. And yes, the wetsuit is in a drag behind you. It just hasn't left yet. And to understand that and say, okay, I get that. And I'm willing to be in this space and time until the evolution of whatever is going on in the universal aspect is ready. So we're kind of all lining up, so to speak, as these lights going forward with some of our human wetsuits just dragging behind us and knowing that it will be coming, don't you think?
I think the physical can actually really dance with the light, so lots of times I think if we think of it as the heaviness of the physical, right? It's sort of like weighing us down or something. But if you, going back to the earlier point where I was talking about really lending the person or the character or the form to the formless, like saying, here, you take it, you take over. I think that's when the physical really starts to change and becomes lighter, and it feels more like a dance than a drag. And and I think that's also times people fear going into these deeply, I'm hesitant to use words like spiritual because they're so, they can become very, to the points you were making earlier about the ways words get really weighed down. But I think the fear of like, well, if I just go into that, what's going to happen? Am I going to be able to enjoy this? Well, I think it's actually the opposite. It's almost like when you look at someone who is a great teacher and you would think they would almost be a non-entity, when it's precisely the opposite. They're very, very big characters, and they allow that because they know they're not that. And they know that the character is just your entry point to the teaching. And the teaching anyway is just the being. lots of times I tell people, we don't teach anybody anything. I would never be so,
right.
I don't even know what to call it, obtuse to think that I can teach it, but I can be it. And if I am it, well, then that's when you'll pick up on it. And that's when you'll know it and you'll see it, like we said earlier, as a potential for you.
Right. I think sometimes people were using the words and they would say, you still have a lesson to learn. And I'm going, oh, that word. I have this list of kick it to the curb words, you know what I mean? And it gets longer and longer by the day. Lesson is right up there. There are no lessons. There's only experiences and being. I mean, just lessons, it almost seems like it's like the thing you go up the ladder, you know what I mean? In other words, you're better than other people. Mm-hmm. You have more this, that, or the other, whatever that might be. And it truly doesn't, it doesn't resonate with an expanded being. It just doesn't even show up. So I think the idea is that when people come at you with this, well, let's teach you some lessons, it's like, no. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's let it be, right?
Yeah, I believe actually in that moment, that's where you see if someone really is kind of what they're professing to be, because they will feel neither obligation nor desire to teach you anything. And it's a little bit, it's reminding me too of in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, he who teaches one who does not wish to learn is performing an immoral act. And besides, they can't hear you anyway. So the people who are trying to impart some kind of lesson is maybe because they haven't quite gotten it themselves, and that's fine. That's totally fine, because we can all go through that phase. I certainly went through that phase, and I can still maybe get trapped in that sometimes. I don't know. But the point is, you will feel no inclination. I feel absolutely no inclination to tell anyone anything, but then I'll share these truths that come from my being, from this force source energy that we're talking about, from this light, from whatever metaphor you want to use. That's irrelevant. And then if it's in resonance, you're going to feel something. It's going to move you, and it won't even necessarily, like we said, maybe be much deeper than the words themselves.
Right. Well, I think also, too, in closing, Cortney, we can say that what we've shared today is not, get out a pencil and paper and you have to follow these rules and lessons. Or you don't even have to hear the words, so you could put it on replay. I always tell people, play the show as background noise. You'll get what you need. That's it. Move on. I think that's truly about, can you hear the frequency that is coming through? Can you just allow something to trigger or open, or perhaps maybe just dampen or have you sit still? And that's all it might be. It's as simple as that. And are we ready for that? And I think people are really coming to the place where they're getting very tired. They're pretty much worn out. So I think we really, truly are going to see something, evolve even quicker at warp speed, where people are going to become more connected and want to be able to have a different life, don't you think?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah. I have faith. Absolutely. Well, I think, Cortney, your book, Give Yourself Permission, Be Confident, Be Happy, Be You, is the year 2024. Can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Thank you. Yes. So my name is Cortney without a U. So that's really important, because I think if you put in Cortney with a U, you find someone else. So it's Cortney and then McDermott. So that's the full URL to CortneyMcDermott.com, but there's also CortInc.com, since there is that often misspelling. So it's CortInc.com as well. So that's the website. And then the full name is also where you can find me on Instagram, on LinkedIn. We're pretty active on those channels, active enough, sharing some of these concepts and ideas. And yeah, those are the best places. And the book is pretty much anywhere where books are sold. So yeah.
Very good. Well, we thank you so much for joining us today, Cortney, because I think sometimes people, like I said, need to hear in some other aspect of their unconsciousness, so to speak. It's not about how can I put A plus B and be able to get out C. It's not a recipe anymore. So I think what we've truly shared today is about being able to, are you willing to, as I've always shared, dance in the ethers? And I think we did a great job of that today. So we thank you so much for dancing with us in the ethers.
Thank you. I'm really inspired by your work, and everyone who's listened, thank you so much, because, sticking with something like this means it's already yours. So, thank you so much, Dr. Jeanette.
Thank you so much. If you'd like to find out more information about Cortney McDermott, again, her book is Give Yourself Permission, Be Confident, Be Happy, Be You. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to her website for more information. And it is about being able to say it's going to be okay. Many people have already been doing this over the eons. Perhaps they just didn't share about it. Maybe someone says, I kind of had that thought in my mind, and I wasn't sure about it. Can we talk? Can we have a little dance in the ethers? Can we sit and look at the ocean for a while and have nothing to say? Can we come across and say, oof, that was an experience. Let me tell you about it, and look at it in reflection. This is truly about being able to say there's so much more to this world, this human existence, and are we open to it? Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit drjeanettegallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.